Daniel chapter 3. King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold 60 cubits high, 6 cubits wide, and set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. He then summoned the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the other provincial officials to come to the dedication of the image he had set up. So the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the other provincial officials assembled for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up, and they stood before it. Then the herald loudly proclaimed, "Nations and peoples of every language, this is what you are commanded to do. As soon as you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace." Therefore, as soon as they heard the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, and all kinds of music, all the nations and peoples of every language fell down and worshipped the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. At this time, some astrologers came forward and denounced the Jews. They said to King Nebuchadnezzar, "May the king live forever. Your Majesty has issued a decree that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music must fall down and worship the image of gold, and that whoever does not fall down and worship will be thrown into a blazing furnace. But there are some Jews whom you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who pay no attention to you, your Majesty. They neither serve your gods nor worship the image of gold you have set up." Furious with rage, Nebuchadnezzar summoned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So these men were brought before the king. And Nebuchadnezzar said to them, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the image of gold I have set up? Now, when you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, if you are ready to fall down and worship the image I made, very good. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into a blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand?" Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to him, "King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your Majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your Majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up." Then Nebuchadnezzar was furious with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and his attitude towards them changed. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times hotter than usual and commanded some of the strongest soldiers in his army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the blazing furnace. So these men, wearing their robes, trousers, turbans, and other clothes, were bound and thrown into the blazing furnace. The king's command was so urgent and the furnace so hot that the flames of the fire killed the soldiers who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and these 3 men, firmly tied, fell into the blazing furnace. Then King Nebuchadnezzar leapt to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors, "Weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw into the fire?" They replied, "Certainly, your Majesty." He said, "Look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods." Nebuchadnezzar then approached the opening of the blazing furnace and shouted, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here." So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire, and the satraps, prefects, governors, and royal advisors crowded around them. They saw that the fire had not harmed their bodies, nor was a hair of their heads singed. Their robes were not scorched, and there was no smell of fire on them. Then Nebuchadnezzar said, "Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him and defied the king's command and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own God. Therefore, I decree that the people of any nation or language who say anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego be cut into pieces, and their houses be turned into piles of rubble, for no other God can save in this way." Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego in the province of Babylon. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks, Katrina. Now, just a heads up that some of today's talk is pretty confronting, including this opening story. Holding a gun to her head, he asked, "Do you believe in God?" She was just 17 years old. She paused and said, "Yes, I believe in God." He asked, "Why?" But he never gave her the chance to respond. This type of scene, it seems so remote, doesn't it? So distant. So much like the kind of story you might hear happening in a country or a culture that's very different to ours. And yet this scene took place in the United States. Her name was Cassie, a high school girl just going about her everyday life. "Do you believe in God?" To which, even with her faith under fire, she stood firm in the faith and said, "Yes." Now, while this may seem very remote to us, as I was reminded just a few days ago by Open Doors at their 2026 Global Persecution Update, in some parts of the world, it's an everyday event for people to be persecuted, to suffer, even to die for their faith in Jesus. And it's something that's been happening for a very long time, as shown in Daniel 3. As we see in this book of Daniel, the people of God, they found themselves living in Babylon, the city of man, a city of arrogance and idolatry, a first world city, a city of technological superiority, a city that defies God and crushes his people. A city much like Sydney today. And as Daniel and his friends, they live and they work in Babylon, they live and work as God's people. They live and work with honesty and with integrity. They faithfully serve the king, but they will not worship him. As God's people, they cannot worship Nebuchadnezzar. They cannot worship anyone or anything but God. The commandments God's given them are very clear. The first two being, you must not worship any god but the real one. And you must not bow down and worship any image. Now, as we've already seen, life in Babylon can actually be very comfortable for God's people. Good education, good career opportunities, good food and drink. But in chapter 3, we see that it can also be very dangerous. See, King Nebuchadnezzar sets up this golden statue. It's huge. It's about 9 stories high. It's covered in gold. And he makes a law that anyone who doesn't fall down and worship the statue will be thrown into a fiery furnace. Now, Babylon, it's a multicultural place. It's got many different peoples with many different gods. And so Nebuchadnezzar kind of tries to unite them under this one common religion. How? Well, with this one golden image. They don't have to give up their other gods, though. They just have to bow down to this one too. Does this all kind of sound a bit foreign to you? Well, it shouldn't. Because it's really not all that different to multicultural Sydney, a society with many different beliefs, a society that tries to unite them under one common religion. And what is it? It's the religion of tolerance, something you dare never speak against. But unfortunately, the meaning of tolerance has actually been changed and wrongly defined by our culture. Because it used to mean, I disagree with you, but I respect your right to an opinion, to your opinion. And that's what tolerance should mean. But tolerance today, though, has been distorted to mean, I cannot disagree with you, because everything that everyone believes is right as long as they sincerely believe it. Which really, and wrongly means there is no truth, because even contradictory positions are equally true. And so, like in Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon, in Sydney, Australia, a giant idol was set up and an edict went out saying, when you meet with other people and hear other opinions, you must say that all opinions are of equal value, that sincerity equals truth, that all religions are true and that Jesus is just one way among many. Therefore, you must not talk about Jesus with the hope that others will follow after him. If you disobey this cultural edict, you'll be politically incorrect. You'll be labelled as a fundamentalist. You'll be ostracised. You'll be ignored, mocked, and possibly even abused. If you bow to this edict, though, the false god of tolerance and political correctness will triumph. Jesus will be considered just one way among many ways, and the true Christian gospel will be heard by less and less people. And you know what? This is not as remote and distant as you think. I'm not sure if you know this, but although SRE is still allowed in New South Wales schools, I mean, it's not allowed in many other places. It's still allowed in New South Wales, but even in New South Wales, it is not meant to be taught with the intent to convert students. Did you know that? Some years back, I took some of my kids to see the film God's Not Dead 2. A film that illustrates the very point that I'm making about our culture and its decree that we mustn't promote Jesus but instead toe the line of tolerance. Because in this film, a teacher answers a simple question about Jesus in a history class. As a result, she's suspended from teaching, taken to court, nearly destroyed financially and vocationally, simply because she will not say that it was inappropriate to answer a question about Jesus. Well, how does Nebuchadnezzar's decree go? Does it work? Pretty much, because all the peoples, nations, and men of every language fall down and worship the statue. But not Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who, verse 12, neither served Nebuchadnezzar's gods nor worshipped the image of gold he'd set up. So, with furious rage, Nebuchadnezzar summons them and says, now when you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, if you are ready to fall down and worship the image I made, very good. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into a blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand? In other words, conform, or else deny your God, worship the idol, or die. So how do they respond? From verse 16, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego reply to him, King Nebuchadnezzar, we don't need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we're thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if he doesn't, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. What did they do? Well, even with their faith under fire, like literally, they stood firm in their faith. They would not bow down to any other god, but only to God himself. And notice that they didn't simply trust in God because they thought he'd rescue them from the furnace. They had no idea whether he'd actually save them from this. But they knew that God could save them. And they said, even if he chooses not to, we will not deny him. We will not bow down to any idol, no matter what. Even under fire, even under the threat of death. Now this causes Nebuchadnezzar to have a major dummy spit. He loses it completely, and he orders that they be thrown into the fiery furnace, which is so hot, by the way, that it killed even the soldiers who got close enough to throw them in. And so what's the outcome for these three faithful friends, these three friends who would not deny their faith in the living God? From verse 24, then King Nebuchadnezzar leaped to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors, weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw into the fire? They replied, certainly, your majesty. He said, look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods. Nebuchadnezzar then approached the opening of the blazing furnace and shouted, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire, and the satraps, prefects, governors, and royal advisors crowded around them. They saw that the fire had not harmed their bodies, nor was a hair of their heads singed, their robes were not scorched, and there was no smell of fire on them. What? I mean, praise be to God, to our almighty, all-powerful God. Praise be to God. How do we apply this miraculous event, though, today in our lives? Do we read this as saying that God will always rescue us from earthly trials if we have enough faith? Answer? No. Because God doesn't always rescue in this world his faithful people from persecution, from suffering, even from death in this world. As Open Doors shares with us, many Christians today live with the daily threat of real and present danger for standing firm in their faith. For us, the threats will probably be minor by comparison, but there'll still be threats if you stand firm. And so the question is, why does God allow his people to suffer and be persecuted in this world? Why doesn't he always spare his people from suffering? Well, the Apostle Peter gives us an answer to this in his first letter, a letter written to Christians who were suffering. In 1 Peter 1, he says, in all this you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while you may have had to suffer grief in all kinds of trials. These have come so that the proven genuineness of your faith, of greater worth than gold which perishes even though refined by fire, may result in praise, glory and honour when Jesus Christ is revealed. See, suffering under fire, it strengthens our faith. It refines our faith, just like gold's refined by fire. And it brings honour to God. Maybe like me though, you don't really suffer all that much for being a Christian. So how can our faith, yours and mine, be refined and proved genuine without much suffering? How can you and I stand firm for our faith in Sydney today? Because where's the fire? Well, just as Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon demanded conformity, so does Sydney. So does Sydney. Which demands that we, like good little Aussies, toe the line, not speak out for Jesus, and not refuse to bow to today's idols of tolerance and of worldliness. Because if you refuse to conform, you'll stand out. You will. And you will feel the heat. If you refuse to conform, that is. You see, in our world, they mightn't be 90-foot gold statues, but our idols, they're everywhere. Maybe for you, they're in the pursuit of pleasure through drugs or alcohol, sex or sensory satisfaction, parties or possessions, houses or holidays. Maybe for you, they're in the pursuit of power or influence through your job, your family, your church. Maybe for you, they're in the pursuit of knowledge or status. You see, although each of our idols will be different, and while there mightn't be a fiery furnace around every corner, we each of us, truly do need to put our faith into practice in all the little day-to-day challenges. And then it'll more likely be strong and ready for when the big ones come. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. If you don't live out your faith, but instead bow down to idols, if you don't live out your faith, but instead you just bow down to idols when the temperature's low, you're not going to suddenly have great faith under fire. You're not going to suddenly stand firm when the heat's turned up. I mean, later in chapter 6, which we're going to look at in a few weeks, we see Daniel standing firm in his faith, refusing to conform and pray to King Nebuchadnezzar instead of to God. And why was Daniel so ready for his trial when it came? Well, because Daniel had prayed to God 3 times a day, every day for years. Daniel put his faith into practice in this way day after day. And so when the big challenge came, there was almost no challenge at all. His faith was strong under fire, just like his friends here in chapter 3, and so he just continued praying to God as he'd always done. See, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego and Daniel, they didn't spend their whole lives in front of furnaces or lions' dens. But when those key moments came, when their faith was really put to the test, they were ready. Their faith was strong, and so they were able to stand firm. And friends, we too need to be ready, because there'll be threats to our faith for sure. The fire, in some form or other, will come. Sometimes it'll bring persecution and suffering. Sometimes it'll be laced with offers of pleasure for turning your back on God. But if we put our faith into practice, if we stand firm in the small things, then our faith will be refined and strong in the big things, and then we'll stand firm in our faith even when it's under fire. Do you see? Let me finish with a story. When the Russian army occupied Romania, two armed Russian soldiers entered a Christian church with guns in their hands. They said to those who were gathered inside, "Those of you who don't abandon your faith will be shot. Those of you who do abandon your faith, move to the right, leave the church now and go home." Some moved to the right and fled from the building in haste. Let me ask each of you, if you were in that situation, what would you do? Would you stay or would you go? Would you stay or would you go? When the Russian soldiers were all alone with the remaining Christians, well, what did they do? Here's what they did. They embraced these Christians and they said to them, "We too are Christians, but we wish to have fellowship only with those who consider the truth worth dying for." Brothers and sisters, as Christians, we're all called to stand firm in the faith, to have faith in Jesus, even under fire. I guess the question for us is, will you stand firm? Will you stand firm in this culture and be politically incorrect, not compromising, not conforming, and not bowing down to idols day after day after day? Why? Because you know and you trust that fourth man in that furnace, that the Son of God himself has been through the hottest of fire so as to save you from it for all eternity. Amen.